we think about school, we usually think about the final grade, right? An A, a B, maybe a 75%. But is that really the whole story? Today, we're going to pry open the assessor's toolbox and look at all the different ways we can figure out what students are actually learning.
So, here's the plan. First, we'll look through the teacher's eyes at those small, everyday checks they do. Then, we're going to flip the script and see what happens when students take charge of their own assessment. After that, we'll get into the more formal stuff, like tests and rubrics. And finally, we'll see how all these pieces come together to build a full portrait of a learner.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? A letter grade is just one snapshot. So, how do we watch the whole movie of a student's learning journey? Well, that's exactly what these tools are for.
All right, first up, let's talk about the tools teachers are using all the time, sometimes so subtly that students don't even realize it's happening. This is all about taking the daily pulse of the classroom, making little adjustments on the fly.
It all starts with observation. This is the foundation. It's a teacher just scanning the room and noticing things, seeing those little aha moments, the slight frown that means confusion, or who's working well together. It's the most human kind of data you can get.
Okay, so you see something important. How do you make that observation stick? That's where an anecdotal record comes in. It's really just the simple act of jotting down a key moment. Something like, hey, Johnny explained the water cycle perfectly to his group today. That one little note, it captures a huge leap in his understanding. It becomes part of his story.
Now, if you want to get a little more organized, you grab a checklist. This adds some real structure. A teacher can track very specific skills like, can the student cite evidence from the text? Check. It makes the whole process more systematic. But what's really powerful is that this isn't just a tool for teachers, and that leads us to our next big idea, which is all about students owning their learning. Look, the best assessment doesn't just happen to a student, it happens with them. So this next set of tools is designed to empower students to actually see and track their own progress. Think of journals or literacy logs as a student's personal think space. It's a place for them to react to a story, write down what they really think, or maybe just keep a list of cool new words they've found. It's part assessment, sure, but it's also part personal diary of their learning. I just love this quote from the source material. It totally captures the spirit of it. It's not about memorizing a boring vocabulary list. It's about building a personal relationship with words, collecting ones that are new, interesting, and entertaining. It's about finding the joy in learning. Okay, now this is where the real magic happens. When you teach a student how to assess their own work, they start to understand what good actually looks like. They become their own progress monitor, and they get motivated to improve for themselves. This might be one of the most underrated tools in the whole box. When a student has to assess a classmate's work using a clear set of rules, something amazing happens. Suddenly, the expectations for the project become crystal clear to everyone, not just the person getting the feedback.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about the more formal tools. These are the structured, often graded assessments that are all about measuring achievement against a set standard.
First up, the big one, the standardized test. Think of this as the wide-angle lens. Our source material calls it maybe the most objective and scientific measure out there, because it gives you one consistent measuring stick to compare students against a really broad group.
But on the flip side, you have performance assessment. This is more of a close-up lens. It's not about what you know, it's about what you can do. The example from our source is perfect. Instead of a worksheet on calculating area, you have students actually find the square footage of their own classroom. It's learning in action.
So yeah, you can see the difference laid out right here. The standardized test is all about assessing what a student knows. The performance assessment is about what a student can do with that knowledge. They're both valuable, for sure, but they tell us very different stories.
And then we have the rubric. Its superpower is making things crystal clear. By laying out all the rules for success before a student even starts, it just completely demystifies grading. It's like giving them the map to their destination right from the beginning.
Okay, so we've looked at the everyday informal checks and the big formal benchmarks, but how do you actually bring all that information together? This last set of tools is all about synthesis, weaving everything together to create that full, rich picture of a learn.
A portfolio is basically a student's personal art gallery. It's this curated collection of their work, essays, projects, even tests, that tells the story of how they've grown over a semester or maybe a whole year. It's not about a single moment, it's all about the journey.
And what's cool is, they're not all the same.
A showcase portfolio, for instance, that's like a greatest hits album, just the absolute best work. But a progress portfolio, that's different. It might show a messy first draft right next to the final polished essay, and that tells a really powerful story about growth.
And finally, we have the conference. This isn't just a report card readout, it's a conversation. It's where all the data, all the observations, all the portfolio pieces come together. It's a chance to set goals, and most importantly, it puts the student right at the center of the conversation about their own learning.
So, at the end of the day, what's the big takeaway? It's that there is no single magic tool. You know, a great carpenter doesn't just own a hammer, they have a whole toolbox. And it's the same idea here. The real goal is to use the right combination of all these tools to build a complete and honestly a compassionate understanding of every single student.
And that leaves us with one final big question for you to think about. Look back at all these tools we've talked about, the simple observation, the big standardized test, the personal portfolio. If you had to pick just one, which one do you think tells the most honest story of a student's growth? It's a tough one, but it's definitely something worth mulling over. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.